All right, so as we get started with learning Adobe InDesign, we're going to take a look at some of the features that you can do. First thing I'm going to look at is text wrapping around an image. Now, what do I mean by that? If you look at this image, for example, notice how the text just wraps right around the graphic, right? This is like a really cool effect that you can do in Adobe InDesign. Notice, for example, this picture is not the same. The picture is superimposed, right? That's not a wraparound. That's not at all the thing that we're talking about doing. Wrapping around, like here in a sense, it's wrapping around, right? You can see the text moves around it. And if you look online, you'll see there's lots of really cool examples of this. I think it's a pretty neat effect. Here's a couple of really good ones. This flower here, you can see how text wraps right around it. Or in this ad, you can see the text tends to kind of bend. It doesn't have to wrap around, 360 degrees, but it does wrap around it. This is a really good example. So how do we do this in Adobe InDesign? Well, let me show you. Let me show you how we do this. So I've opened up InDesign, and I've got a brand new window here. And notice that the way the workspace is set up, this looks a lot like what you've seen in Illustrator and in Photoshop. Very similar. You've got similar tools, a few different things. You've got the same kind of layout. I'm using one particular workspace, and there's lots of different ways to organize the workspace depending on your project. I have it set for typography because I'm dealing with text and letters. A lot of times people keep it on advanced or essentials. It doesn't really matter to see which one you like the best, but I'm going to keep it on typography for now. So let's say, for example, in this project, you're going to take a poem and you're going to incorporate an image so the poem wraps around the image. A little bit like what we did in Illustrator, but it's different because you're now going to be doing the wraparound effect. So some of these tools here, let's take a look at. There is a text tool here, and I'm going to click on it. And first thing I'm going to do is look at, okay, where do I want to put my title? And how do I want to lay it out? Because above all, Adobe InDesign is a program for laying out graphic images. It does have these cool rulers where you can actually drag them down and you can actually line things up. Like, let's say you know that you want to have some edges here. Now, you can, of course, move these. And these lines that I'm creating, they won't show up in the final version. They're just there to help you lay out what you're doing. So let's say I want a text box and I want it to fill in right about here. So I'm in the text tool and I'll click and drag and I'll make it and I'll line it up with my lines as I see fit here. And then I will start to type whatever I'm going to type. So let's say poem by me, let's say. Now I can double click on this and of course I can go up and I can change the size, make it whatever size I want. I can go inside here and do all the little changes that we've looked at in other programs as far as the way the text works. Change the fonts, of course. Get in here right now, it's set for Minion Pro, but I can pick whichever one I want to use, right? And of course I can still move it around wherever I want it to go. I can adjust it and so forth. And I can adjust these lines if I want to. But let's say I'm pretty happy with the way it's settled right there. So next thing I do is I want to actually put the poem in here, and I'm going to create an image to put in the middle. So I'm going to use the text box again, and this time I will click and drag, and I'll let go. Now I want to see what it's going to look like with text in place, right? So this is a neat feature here where I can go to type, and I go down here to fill with placeholder text. Now this is just like we did before in Illustrator. It's all just Latin words, just so you can actually play around with it, see what it looks like. Of course, I can select it and I can change any of the settings here that I want to change. And of course, I can also take my poem and copy and paste it in place of this Latin placeholder text, which is what you would do as you're going. So I might look at this just to get an idea of like, hey, I kind of like this, but maybe I want it to be up a little higher so I could pull it up and I get an idea of like how I'm laying this out. I might decide just to change things up a bit, get things centered the way I want it to be centered, and work with it like that, right? So once I'm happy, I'm going to get my image. Now, with images, it's a little bit different with InDesign. You actually place them. It's called placing the image. So I have a picture that I've already saved on my desktop, and I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to Place, okay, to look for that picture. So it's going to open up my computer. I'm going to see, okay, I have one here that I'm going to use. Okay, so I've placed the image and I can move it where I want it to go. Now notice something here. Right now the picture is actually not wrapping around. It's actually just sitting on top of the text. So this isn't quite what I want yet. So I have to do a couple things to enable the wraparound. So I'm going to go up here, and it's a little button here, but you can see it says Wraparound Object Shape. Looks like a little egg in the middle of some lines. So I'm going to click on that and notice, oh, look at this. It's now created some space so that it's actually planted in the middle of my text. And I can go over here to Text Wrap, and I can increase the amount of spacing that's here, and I can fool around with it. Now, the trick here is that as the way I have it set up right now, it's wrapping around this picture box. But let's say I wanted it to wrap around her ears, right? Like tracing the edges of the ears instead of a block. There's another little trick you can do, which is where I go to Object, and I will go down here to what's called the Clipping Path. Clipping Path Options. Now this is going to look at the image and figure out the lines. So I go to Clipping Path Options, and I can decide how I want to do this. I like to say for the type, detect edges, and you can adjust the threshold and so forth. Click OK, and now it's starting to work here. And then I go over here, and you'll see under Text Wrap, I had selected this for same as clipping for the contour options, right? Instead of bounding box. Bounding box is like this, but if I select detect edges, it actually takes a look at the edges. So now you can see that the image is actually wrapping around. Now it's not exactly perfect here, but you kind of get the idea of how it looks. And you can always move it around to see how it looks. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the center either. Sometimes you can put it off to the side and it will kind of wrap around it. Some people will do something like that, or put it over here and you can see this kind of effect. It's really kind of cool. One final thing you can do is if you work with this, the white direct selection tool, you can also click on your image and you can fool around with resizing your actual text box. You can even drag it and make it into irregular shapes. So it's kind of fun to play with it. So that gives you the basics of how to do text wrapping.